Remember how I said that there's only one hunter build that you can use on this patch? Well, that is true if you're a pro player, but it's not necessarily true for you. Unless of course you are a pro player playing scrims right now. Ahoy, I'm Duke and today we're looking at two hunter build variations that may work better outside of competitive than the option that is used in competitive. Let me explain. The laning phase in competitive at the moment is incredibly passive when it comes to hunters. They're just farming up until late game and they're building everything towards late game. Their items have basically no relevance for earlier stages of the game, since late game is reached so fast and you just want to get multiple crit items. Therefore, you're seeing all the safe options. If you're not familiar with the build, it's Gilded Arrow, later turned into Ornate Arrow, Ninja Tabi, Devourer's Gauntlet, Executioner, Wind Demon, and Deathbringer. So lifesteal for late game, protection reduction for late game, and crit for late game. But if you're not playing competitively, and this really applies for all levels of play from the lowest of casuals to the highest of ranked, then the situation is different. Zapman recently made a ranked hunter tier list and put Izanami in the highest tier, arguing that people in ranked cannot play well against pressure. They do not know how to respond to that, they don't want to play passive enough in order to be safe in such situations, and so on. And that is where these alternative builds come in, which allow you to have more early aggression, more early damage, and then transition into a similar late game as the standard build, or better ideally. The idea for this build came from Angel, who's been fragging in a lot of our games with this build, and I also made another variation that I expected to be better. And in that context, we're also going to revisit an item that I initially wrote off. The first build we're going to look at here is the one that Angel uses. In this build, you still start out with Gilded Arrow. But the stacking item you're building, if you build it before or after boots is up to you, same as with the Devourer's Gauntlet build, is Transcendence. This gives you a significant power spike early, because Transcendence scales with the mana that you have and also comes with a decent amount of mana, so even before your own mana is factored in, this already provides 44 physical power for more early pressure. For boots you're building Ninja Tabi, these are just the best boots for hunters and they also have mana for Transcendence. And then you're building your sustain item, which is RC. Now I know what you might be thinking now, but hold on a second, okay? The other two items after that are Fail Not and Deathbringer. And then you upgrade Gilded Arrow to Ornate Arrow. Now you likely immediately notice a few downsides here. You have a slightly lower crit chance because Fail Not doesn't provide as much as Wind Demon. You have a more expensive build overall because Transcendence is more expensive than Devourer's Gauntlet and RC is more expensive than Executioner, and Fail Not is also more expensive than Wind Demon. And you also access your sustain later, and again, this is at a higher price point, which may be a bit of a struggle. And this is where the pressure difference comes in. Because Transcendence provides you with MP5, you can clear a fair bit more aggressively, and you should be able to build a little bit of a lead in early game. And that should allow you to get by without Devourer's Gauntlet. That's how Transcendence hunters have always gotten by. Also, once you finish RC, you get a massive secondary power spike. At that point, the enemy either finishes Executioner, which is not particularly great for boxing other hunters, or Wind Demon, which as a singular crit item is also not too effective, while RC comes with power and flat pan, which means if you have hard-hitting abilities, they're gonna hit a whole lot harder at this point. Not to mention that RC heavily outtrades Devourer's Gauntlet for the purpose of lifesteal when it comes to boxing another hunter. But again, at least at first glance, there are downsides here. The total cost is 14,700, whereas the Devil's build is 13,750, so 950 gold cheaper. And again, you lack percentage pen, but we have to find out how much of a difference that really makes. On the upside, aside of the clearing and aggression potential that I already mentioned, you also get the Fail Not passive, which a lot of hunters really enjoy. Combined with the additional 30% CDR in this build, there are some things that should really appeal to ability-focused hunters especially. What's also very nice is that as a crit build is a lot more consistent. Your damage doesn't hinge on Executioner stacks or Wind Demon procs and whichever happens whenever, and you will always deal the same amount of damage with a crit and with a non-crit. So I thought this build was an interesting idea to build upon, and I wanted to try another build to see how that compares. You may remember that early in the season I made a video talking about Dominance, and I said that it's generally not worth it for most hunters. Keep in mind this was also at a time where Berserker's Shield was completely broken. Anyways, at the time Izard, who I mentioned in the video, responded to the video. They were the one who ran Dominance as the first item after the starter on Anhur in the Smite Challenger Circuit qualifiers. The reason they gave was very interesting. It was that Dominance allowed them to frequently use all 3 abilities on Anhur for clearing. And this obviously translates to other guards and other abilities as well, and this was at a time when Death Toll was the primary hunter item, so now you actually get the MP5 from Gilded Arrow on top of that as well. Now if you're using Gilded Arrow, it's not always advisable to insta-clear in every situation, but having a lot of mana just to spam abilities and pressure the enemy carry as well can make a big difference, especially if they are so focused on the farm alone. Resulting from that, the second build that I put into the race, which is kind of a combination of the two, is Gilded Arrow into Honored Arrow at the end, Dominance, Ninja Tabai, RC, Wind Demon, and Deathbringer. The concept here is similar to Angel's build. With Dominance and RC in early game, you do way more ability damage, you have way better boxing potential, and you can use that aggression to get a lead in lane. And different from Angel's build, the total cost of this build is 14,300. That is only 550 gold more expensive than the standard Devil's build, and even the early price spike is slightly lower. As such, I think if you're able to leverage the pressure that you can get through this build, you should be able to easily overcome this slight gold difference. The downside compared to Angel's build is that you don't get massive amounts of CDR, but the upside is that your basic attacks immediately have 20% pen in late game and 30% once you crit. So what has changed for me to value Dominance more now? On one hand, when I compared Dominance to other things, it was mainly looking at pen, and it doesn't really work that well as a typical pen build item since it doesn't amplify items like Kinsai. On a crit build, however, the damage comes from the basic attack, so Dominance affects the crit as well. In addition to that, much of the value that Executioner has or had over Dominance comes from attack speed, but in the builds that we're currently seeing, attack speed doesn't really have that much value compared to having a little bit of extra power, because you already get so much attack speed from a few items that you're building. If you're building Ninja Tabe and Executioner or RC and Wind Demon, you basically have enough attack speed in your build already. You don't really need to worry about additional attack speed effects, items, and so on. So Dominance having more power and immediate pen could actually be more important. But is it more important? In order to find that out, I had to beat up Odinbot for a really long time. No, seriously, I used S DPS from ND97 because a normal DPS calculation wouldn't really work with things like Executioner and Crit, because that's RNG at the end of the day. For each scenario, I recorded at least 20 different DPS values and then evened them out. So what I did first was test this on a level 20 Odin with his base protections, technically a squishy, with 76 physical protection. And the goal here for the first set of tests was to hit 1900 damage, which is around enough to kill a squishy. The standard Devourer's Gauntlet build, the DPS averaged out was 1251. With bad crit luck it could end up being 859, while with the highest crit luck it ended up being 1560. With Angel's Transcendence build, the DPS was 1247. So we're talking less than 20 DPS difference, which means if we would run a larger number of tests, this could very well actually even out, and the difference is absolutely negligible. The lowest recorded value here was 706 DPS with super bad crit luck, while the highest DPS value was 1566. So here the DPS difference was really small, which means for the purpose of boxing, the Transcendence build would most certainly win. Because what this doesn't factor in is that you can also apply the Failnode passive to enemies for a higher crit chance, which would increase the DPS, and you also have the higher CDR for more abilities, as well as some flat pen for more ability damage. And you should have higher power too. But we have a third competitor, the Dominance build I came up with, and that actually ends up with the highest DPS of 1320. Here the lowest DPS value was 945, while the highest one was 1683. What I would say the difference is in the Dominance build's favor, it is not massively in its favor. If RNG went a little bit differently while trying the crit builds, it could have gone in a different way as well, I think. It could have been closer to the other builds. So I don't think this 100% indicates that Dominance build will always have higher crit damage, but it is most certainly more reliable in its damage than the Devil's build because it doesn't need the ramp up with Executioner. But what's also important to know is what happens when we're fighting against a tank, because that is where I expected the Transcendence build to struggle. My target in this case had 2206 protections, and the goal was to deal above 3000 damage to them, which I feel like is an appropriate amount for a tank. Devourer's Gauntlet, over 20 attempts, dealt 680 damage per second on average. This is where this build should really shine, since the Executioner stacks come pretty early and you're doing a lot of basic attacks after that. Angel's Transcendence build dealt 545 damage per second, so as expected we're seeing a pretty significant drop off here. At the same time, considering the other perks of this build, I don't think this drop off is completely horrible. It's not like this build becomes unusable against tanks, you just have some more CDR to maybe create some distance in between, or you have to proc Fail Not on them. But again, there's a third option, and that's the Dominance build. And the Dominance build comes in at 672 damage per second. And that is actually insanely good, because it means what I suspected turned out to be true. Dominance in the current build meta is pretty much equally as effective as Executioner when it comes to damage output overall, when it comes to penetration and DPS that result from all of that. It needs to be paired with RC in order to get the attack speed and the sustain, but I think that is a trade-off worth making. When resulting from that, you completely skip a stacking item and can instead opt into more early aggression. Not only does it allow you to pressure the enemy and actually have a fun laning phase, which is what I'm missing most in dual lane, but also this is something that's pretty much unheard of. For the most part of Smite history, with some brief interruptions, stacking builds were always the best builds in late game. If you usually were to opt into an early aggression build with, for example, Bloodforge, then it would come back to cost you in other ways, through lower sustain, through lower damage, or anything else. That is really not the case with this Dominance build. So I'm really surprised that this works out so well, and I would really recommend trying it out. And obviously, you can also kind of mix and match between that and Angel's variation by trading out Wind Demon for Fail Not. You'll have slightly less cooldown reduction, but you'll still get a little bit more pen that way, and you get a much better early aggression spike through Dominance. It is the best spike of the 3 items by far, because the item is a little bit cheaper than Transcendence and comes with more front-loaded power as well as more MP5. And conveniently, if anyone with a little bit of a bruiser build comes into your lane, you can also deal with them better. So slap some Morningstar items into your build, bring some actual fun back into dual lane, while living in the comfort that what you're building is actually not inefficient at all and might actually just be more efficient than the standard build. That is, of course, unless you're terrified of the idea of not immediately having lifesteal, potentially having to get a small gold lead, and you just prefer being a scared little tower boy. Each to their own, but that's not the type of dual lane that I enjoy. Anyways, please go try this build out if you enjoy an aggressive playstyle, and if you want to see more videos like this, more informational stuff and builds that may work well for you, then click like and subscribe, or I will go to my garage, hide in the corner, stare at my home gym, and contemplate if it's harder for me to find the time. Thanks to my patrons for making this video possible. That is That Nick Walker, Drain Brennan, Lenter 25 Green, Zelaria, Zed the Undead, Nevitz Jr., Rawas, Angel, Zifaroli, as well as everyone else you see here.